This RC Beginner Series is brought to you by Horizon Hobby. Hey, welcome to Flite Test. I'm Josh, and this is Josh.
Hi.
And this is episode 8 of our Beginner Series. If you've missed anything up to this point, make sure you go back and check it out. But today we're talking about transmitters.
Transmitters, yes. In a previous episode, we'll have a link below. We talked about the control systems of an airplane.
Right.
How a transmitter talks to a receiver, goes to the servos, and all the controls from that. This is specifically about the transmitter.
This is the physical control that you hold in your hand.
Yes.
To tell your plane what to do.
And there's a lot of great benefits about this. You can start, it depends on where you want to go with the hobby. If you're just not sure if you want to really get into the hobby and you want to see if you have a knack for flying, you know what, you can go cheap. You can go simple. But if you know you're going to be committed and you want one transmitter for life, you can also go that way too.
I want to go with the shiny one.
Well, you know what, let's talk a little bit about the history too.
Okay.
Back in the day. You like that?
Mm-hmm. When you were in your
When I was
40s.
Younger. Antennas didn't have these nice little stubby things. They worked off of something called 72 megahertz. And they required a crystal, and they were operated on specific frequencies.
A crystal?
And those gave you a tremendous amount of range, but the problem is you could interfere with other people if they flew on the same
Somebody
frequency.
else had 72 megahertz.
Exactly. Exactly. And to this day, they are still used with some hardcore FPV flyers for that super long range that they give you. But today, things have gotten much more advanced, and now we have 2.4. So we've gotten rid of that crazy long antenna.
2.4 gigahertz.
Gigahertz.
This is Gigaplex.
Gigahertz, yes. And they work off a much faster communication speed. And also they do something called frequency hop. You know, in the flying events, when we go to different events, you have sometimes 50, 60 airplanes up at once, right?
Right, yeah.
And no one's grabbing these things called frequency pins and clipping them on their transmitters like the old days.
No.
If you flew in the old days on 56, you actually went and you put your little AMA card in a little pouch, and then you grabbed the little frequency pin and you clipped it on your antenna. And the FCC rules required you to have a little flag saying what channel you're flying, you know, so everyone could see it very clearly.
Make sure that nobody's on the same frequency.
A lot of crazy rules because no one wanted to have an airplane get shot down because
Right.
it's a safety hazard and it's not good for your airframe.
Yeah.
But nowadays, you can just walk to your flight line, power on, and go fly. Reason being is there's something called frequency hopping. You want to guess what that is? Besides this?
It picks another frequency?
Well, kind of. Early days with Spectrum, they had where they'd pick 2 channels, but that wasn't even all that good. So now all communications with 2.4 actually hop through the frequency. Now imagine you have a frequency band of, say, 50 channels, okay? And many times per second, your radio is jumping through all those 50 channels. Sometimes in order. Hopping, exactly. Sometimes in order, sometimes in different algorithms. There's different protocols for different manufacturers. They all have their own way of doing it. But long story short, nothing lines up on the exact same channel too long. So the benefit is you don't have to worry about what's out there in the atmosphere to interfere.
Okay.
Now you do lose a little bit of range because of that, because you don't make these things to go miles and miles and miles.
Right.
Like the old days. So you got to keep it in closer and be very careful what
So if you're
around.
flying around other people, 2.4 gigawatts is probably the way to go.
2.4 gigahertz, yes.
Gigahertz.
Gigahertz. Now, before we go any further, there's one really important thing we got to tell you, and it's one thing you got to remember because it's never going to change for the most part. This radio, which is the Spectrum, will not talk to a high-tech. So if you want to go Spectrum, make sure you're
snotty, huh?
Yeah, no, it's naughty. They all have unique protocols, which means unique ways to communicate with each other. So you don't want to go ahead and buy a Spectrum radio and then buy a high-tech receiver, or expect a bond and fly a Spectrum or Horizon product, which operates off of Spectrum technology, to talk to a high-tech. Okay, so always make sure that everything is brand specific. So if you start with using a Spectrum, make sure you buy the supporting products, aka receivers and anything like that, for that product. So brother, you can see that we have the cheapest here, and it goes around to the most expensive.
The shiny one.
The shiny one, exactly, the one that goes faster, right?
Yeah.
Now, what's the difference? What do you see here?
Well, they all have different number of channels.
Exactly. More switches, more functions, more channels.
More channels. And channels are the functions that you can use for your plane. You know, your elevator, throttle, ailerons, rudder, bomb drops, flamethrowers,
incendiary
crop
devices. Crop dusters.
Yeah, you know about crop dusters.
Love crop dusters. They're awesome.
He does it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, if you're buying like a ready to fly,
yes,
you can most likely expect it to come with a 4 or 5 channel, right?
Yes, this is a 5 channel, and this is actually technically a 5 channel too.
Oh, really? Why did you say 4?
Well, they're lying to you, aren't they? They're giving that little extra bonus.
Thank you.
But you see there's an extra switch over here.
Yes, it says rates.
Exactly. Now that's for your expo and dual rate. And that's pre-programmed here, and so is this one. But we're going to talk about expo and dual rate a little bit later. But one thing to keep in mind, just because you have switches does not mean the number of switches depicts the number of channels.
Okay.
Only the manufacturer specs are going to tell you how many different functions you have.
All right.
All right, so keep that in mind. But we talked to you about getting into 3 or 4 channel, and if you're listening to that, a 4 channel or 5 channel radio is going to be perfect for you.
Because then you have some room to grow.
You have a little bit of room to grow.
You can add that flamethrower down the road.
And I'd honestly say probably the best simplest radio to get involved, the most bang for the buck, would probably be getting into your 6-channel range. The nice thing about that is you can pilot warbirds, you can get upwards into the bigger airplanes and not have to upgrade. Also, you get more computer functions. And computer functionality, what do you think that is? What do you think that gives it to you?
More options for more planes?
More options, you have more planes and memory. The neat thing about this is this transmitter here holds 10 airplanes. So in the olden days, when you had to go and you wanted to fly 10 different airplanes, guess what? You had to have 10 transmitters because it didn't communicate. You know, one transmitter per receiver.
Right.
Later on, they got a little more advanced with computerized radios, which was what this is.
Okay.
But they didn't hold that many. Now this one here is very economical, but it'll actually hold 10 airplanes for you.
Nice.
So all you need to do is buy another receiver, and then you tell it which plane you want to talk to.
Okay.
It'll talk to that, and you can fly that. So that means you don't have to invest in a whole other transmitter every time you want to buy another airplane.
But make sure the receiver is going to talk to this transmitter.
Very, very important. If you have a Spectrum, stay with the Spectrum. Futaba, stay with the Futaba, and et cetera, and so on.
They're very clicky.
Now, one great thing about that is if you get it ready to fly right off the bat and it comes with one of these transmitters, you're not out of transmitter, because the beautiful thing about this is this will talk to this through a buddy cord. So if you keep your makes and your models the same, you can actually use this in future airplanes, and you can now, say, train your child after you learn to fly.
Nice.
Or you can train a buddy how to fly using a buddy cord.
Let's say Josh and I are at the field flying.
And I want to learn to fly.
He's not feeling too sure of himself.
Yes.
Well, I've got my trusty DX6 here, and I'm controlling the plane. What we can do is I can actually plug in to the trainer port, and he plugs into his trainer port, and I can give Josh the option to fly.
Yes.
But if he gets into trouble, starts to crash, I can override instantly.
And the way this would happen is normally while I'm flying, and say the student is flying, you'd be holding in on the training button.
Okay.
The second I get in trouble, which I do often, right?
All the time.
You release it, and you instantly have control.
You would not believe how often I have to bail him out.
All the time. It's crazy. Very valuable resource, because now you can take the hobby to other people, and you don't have to be worried about trying to grab the transmitter out of his hands, especially with kids.
Right.
No one wants to be hovering over a little kid while they're trying to fly, because you know what? They're fast. It's hard to get that transmitter out in time.
And their parents will probably call the cops on you.
They will. Absolutely. All right, so buddy box systems are really, really great, but the 6-channel radios that are computerized, definitely the most bang for the buck. As you go up in quality, you are going to get more functionality, more advanced programming, like your mixes, you're going to get more of those. You're also going to get better quality gimbals and switches and things like that. So the actual hardware and the processors will be better quality too.
Nice.
Okay?
Let's talk about modes.
Modes.
Modes 1 and 2.
Yeah, what do you think a mode is?
Mode is, well, it kind of determines what functions are on what side.
Yeah.
So we
What
fly
the
in
sticks do.
mode 2.
Mode 2, you
right?
got
So
it.
that means that our throttle and rudder is on our left side, and aileron and elevators on the right.
Yep. Now, the important thing to remember is that different modes don't mean better or worse. They're just different.
Okay.
So use the mode that's most common in your area. If you guys are in our area and mode 2 is common, by all means follow mode 2 along with us, because we're always going to be using mode 2.
Yep.
And you can follow along. So if we're talking about right stick control, it'll be the exact same.
Okay.
But use the mode that's most common in your area. Different countries have different popularity with different modes.
Just like how some of them drive on the wrong side of the road.
Exactly. It's not bad. It's just different.
Yeah.
Unless you're from a different area and you go into that area.
And then it's wrong.
Then it's wrong.
All right, so if you're just telling me that this DX6 can be my friend for
Yeah,
life,
6-channel computerized.
why should I pay more for, I mean, except for the fact that this one's shiny?
Yeah, well, functionality and quality too. Let's just talk about the 18 here. So with this, you have 18 channels.
Yeah.
All right. You have virtually unlimited models if you're using the SD card.
Okay.
And you also have higher quality gimbals and potentiometers. You know what a
So, like,
gimbal is?
The feel of it?
The feel of it.
Okay.
Exactly. The spring tension, and actually, when you get more, you done? The gimbals, you can actually adjust the tension on the more advanced ones too. So that means if you have a custom feel that you want to feel a certain way and have a certain resistance, you can change that. But moving on beyond that, you also have things like backlit screens. You have advanced programming. You have multiple mixes. You have throttle curve, synchronization. You have a ton of different modes and setups. You also have really great extra features like sliding functions here.
Ooh.
Faster communication speed and better resolution, which means as you move this, there's more information being transmitted for a stick movement than a cheaper radio.
Ooh.
So there's a lot of different, and also like some radios have also 2 antennas in there, so you have diversity.
Yeah.
You have better chance of not losing communication too.
Oh, nice.
So imagine you're flying a $4,000 gasser someday. You don't want to be flying it with a 6-channel or a 4-channel. But also, with the computer radios, you have more advanced programming. What we were talking about with the 5E here, this is a preset expo and dual rate.
Yeah.
You can't change that. You can't affect that, but this one you can. And you can actually have in multiple functions. You can have 3 different steps instead of 2.
Okay.
So as you go up there, you're definitely getting more quality, you're getting more opportunity to change your experience, and fine-tune your airplanes. And other advanced radios even have touch screens that are backlit too.
What?
Touch screens. You got it.
Outta
Look
here.
at that. You want to change your sub trim? You can. It's just touching it away. So the more advanced you get, no, you can't touch this. This is Dave's radio. The more advanced you get, the more opportunity, more functionality, and also something called telemetry too.
What's that?
Well, have you ever wanted to know what your battery voltage is when you're airplane while you're flying?
Yeah.
Telemetry can tell you that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so when you're flying, you can be like, I wonder if my battery's getting low. And you can actually set up alarms or actually physically look down and they'll tell you live voltage from the airplane.
Nice.
And things like speed, you know, there's tons of different functionality with telemetry.
Cool.
So the more advanced radios will give you that.
Nice.
Okay?
Now, when you're determining what transmitter you're going to buy,
Yeah.
a good thing to consider is the price of the receiver that transmitter is going to be talking to.
You're absolutely right. A expensive transmitter doesn't always mean an expensive receiver, but with the added functionality, it can certainly mean that. So one thing to keep in mind there is how readily available are the receivers in your area, and also what's the price and what kind of plane you're going to fly. If you're going to fly a lot of 4-channel airplanes, you don't really need a high-end receiver. So research forward and find out what the price of those receivers are and make sure you're willing to pay the price. It can fluctuate by 20, 30 bucks a receiver.
All right, now we're going to talk about dual rates and expos.
Very important functions, and probably the most important functions you can look for in a radio beyond your core functions, which is your actual gimbals.
So we have a nice little object lesson set up here.
This is amazing.
And what this is we actually have this one right here is set up to a servo.
This is your control surface. This is connected to a servo, which will normally land a control surface, and
Right.
this is your transmitter here.
So whatever inputs I give over here will be matched by this arrow here.
Exactly.
See?
Exactly.
Everything's
So
all the same.
right now we have 100% on both of them. So 100% throw. That means when we take this to 100%, guess what? We're getting 100%
It's exactly
over here.
the same thing.
Now, dual rates are just that. They're changing your rates. It's giving you the ability to change the rates and the throw of your plane.
Right.
Why do you think we'd want to do that?
So it's not so crazy. So your control surfaces aren't going.
Yeah, so it's not too sensitive.
Right.
So say you're in a circumstance where you want to fly slow and you want to fly fast.
Right.
If you're flying really fast, more airflow means more control sensitivity.
Means that you're going to be.
It's going to be doing
crazy.
this a lot
Yeah.
more. So you can actually, when you're flying in certain modes, say you want to stay maneuverable,
Yeah.
you can have the full authority, your 1-to-1 authority.
Yeah.
But say you want to dial it down a little bit.
Okay.
Say you want to go to 50% throws.
All right. So I'm going to go to 50%.
Yep.
Now what happens is my physical inputs over here stay the same.
Yes.
But the throws that the plane is getting are
The
cut down
output.
to 50% now.
It's cut down. Exactly. And the nice thing about this, the more advanced radios you get, the more you can change your dual rates. You can have 3 positions if you want.
So you can have different percentages of dual rates.
Say you're taking off, and one thing you don't want to do is over control when you're taking off or you're landing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're taking off, you don't want to over control, you can cut your rates down a little bit so you don't end up popping into the air too quickly.
Okay.
Or when you're landing and you want to get that full stall, you can go to high rates and actually settle it down in and fully bleed off all the airspeed.
Nice.
That's really good for
And you can
warbirds.
change your rates midair.
You can change it midair. Say you want to do hardcore aerobatics and really like dogfight with somebody.
Yeah.
You want high rates.
Okay.
But then you want to fly real smooth and maybe put a camera on it and get really smooth control.
Yeah.
You can dial down your rates.
Nice.
Now that's how rates work. Expo.
Expo.
What do you think expo is?
What does it even mean?
Well-
Exponential.
Exponential is,
that
is
right?
the full
I got
word.
it right?
Exactly. Exponential, you're not changing the amount of control surface movement. You're changing the exponential curve from 0 to 100, and you're actually deadening the center area a little bit and letting it still get to the full 100% throw at the very end.
Let's demonstrate it.
All right, it's easier to do that. So
Okay.
you flip down and say you have expo now.
Yeah.
In this case, we'll have 80% expo.
Right.
Okay, so we have an 80% exponential curve going where you have your 100% throw here, but it's going to keep it very minor. Go ahead and show them what happens.
Okay. So in the middle, not much
And
happens.
just take it
here.
to 25% there real quick. Look at that.
Not much going on.
Not much
But
at all.
then when it's like kick it out here, oh my gosh.
That final 20% there is where all your throw is going to be made up, and it's going to go up to 100%.
Yeah.
So really smooth flying here, real nice and gracious. But
Right.
oh my goodness, there's a tree there. I got to pull up.
Ah.
Look at that. This is also exceptional for when you want to change the different flying characteristics and how the plane feels.
Okay.
Also, with the way your linkages are set up too, you have different exponential advantages. When this is moving this way, you have a much more aggressive control of your controls, but as the linkage gets up more here,
Yeah.
you have a lot less.
Okay.
Because this isn't moving it forward laterally this much when it's on that final throw there.
Gotcha.
Okay, so you can deaden that area a little bit so it's not so sensitive on the center stick.
Right.
Okay, so exponential softens your stick a little bit, And
So
dual
what
rates.
kind of flying would you be doing that you would want to have this kind of setup?
Expo and dual rate combinations are wonderful for flying wings and almost any airplane, but I love it on flying wings because one thing you want to do with a flying wing is you want to get really low and really fast and just shoot across the field.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want to go ahead and make adjustments.
Yeah, so when you're doing that, you want it to be nice and soft and not a lot of big movements.
Exactly. And you still want to keep that control authority in case you need to change something very quickly. A well-dialed airplane is going to give you an amazing flight experience, and also you can fly different styles in one flight, not have to change a single thing.
Nice.
So you can go from taking off to aerobatics to combat to low passes, back to landing, all by changing your modes in midair.
Awesome.
On Expo setups, you're going to have positive and negative values, and this is where it's really important to read the manual because, say, on a Futaba, a negative value on Expo softens the stick, but on Spectrum, a negative value will actually make the center area more sensitive. So you have the ability to both soften the center area of your stick and actually make it.
So you can do like the reverse of how we have it, where it's more sensitive here.
More sensitive in the beginning.
Sensitive out here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Not too sure why you'd want to do that, but always reading manufacturer specs. Some you go negative to get a softer stick, some you go positive, but you always have that ability to make the center stick more sensitive as well too.
Okay, cool. So we covered expos, dual rates.
Yep.
We talked about mixing a little bit. You mentioned it.
Yeah, there's lots of different mixes out there, but the most common is actually for your favorite airplane, isn't it?
Yeah, for a wing. Yeah, and so if you're going to start with a wing, you want to make sure that you have a transmitter that can do mixing.
Exactly.
So what it does is it mixes your elevators and your
it's called
ailerons.
Elevon mixing.
Yeah.
And a matter of fact, we have a whole video that goes very in depth on hooking up different transmitters to get you the Elevon mixing.
There should be a link below.
Yeah, there'll be a link below, and then it goes from the DX5 all the way through the DX8. Shows you how to mix different devices.
Yeah.
And Elevon mixing is crucially important because if you don't have that, you cannot fly flying wings.
No.
Unless you build like a crazy slide tray. It's just
because
it's awkward.
the two different control surfaces have to do different
You got
functions.
two
right?
servos plugged into two ports. It has to mix those ports properly to get
Right.
elevator. So when you give up, both servos work in one function, but when you give aileron, the other ones work.
They're different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So make sure if you're going to start with a flying wing, have Elevon mixing.
Check out the video below.
Yeah. All right. Recap time.
Recap.
All right.
So back in the old days, they used to use 72 megahertz.
Long antennas, long range, but also frequency issues. You couldn't fly multiple planes at one time.
Yeah. So
2.4 is the way to go now.
2.4 gigawatts.
And there's also something called frequency hopping. What's
Yes.
frequency hopping?
It's when it actually picks a different frequency when somebody else is flying on the same
It
frequency.
goes through multiple frequencies very, very quickly, so you don't
Right.
have any interference. But every different manufacturer has a different protocol on how they hop from frequency to frequency, so make sure if you start off with a certain brand, you buy the receivers that communicate with that. A Spectrum will not communicate with a Futaba.
Right. Number of channels.
Yes.
There's different transmitters have different numbers of channels. It's good to start with a 4 or a 5
Yes.
if you're going to have like a 3 or 4 channel airplane, give you some room to grow.
Yep.
But you can hop up to a 6.
A 6-channel computerized radio is probably one of the best bang for the buck. If you're going to get it ready to fly, most likely it'll come with a 4 or 5-channel radio that has a single model memory. Once you get up into the 4 channels, you're going to have multiple model memory. You're going to have some advanced parameters like dual rates and expos.
Right. Know your modes. Know what mode is practical in your area.
Yeah.
We usually fly in 2, so if you want to learn what
Two's
we're
good.
doing.
And what 2
good.
is where the right stick has aileron and elevator, throttle and rudder on the left stick. But just choose the one that's most common in your area. If you're getting into it and there's no one really around flying, pick 2. Go along with us.
So the price point for different transmitters all comes down to the functions that each one has. It comes down to how shiny they are.
The gimbals, the quality of the actual hardware in there, the processors, the gimbals, the
More
switches.
channels.
More channels. The more you go up in these advanced features, the higher the price tag's going to get, but also the longer the radio is going to last, and it'll be less likely you need to upgrade your radio.
Right. More memory storage as well.
Also telemetry, where the plane can communicate with the radio and give you that information.
Yeah. Dual rates and expos we talked about. Dual rates is when you kind of soften the so the input that you give kind of softens the output of the...
Exactly. Dual rates, the higher the dual rate value, the less actual output you're going to have. So if you have 50% dual rate, when you move your stick 100%, you're only getting 50% of the movement.
Right.
But exponential is a little bit different.
Exponential is when you have a certain area, like, for example, we had ours kind of deadened in the center.
Yes.
So that bigger movements weren't so big on the outputs, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it softens the center of the stick. So basically, your movements around the center of the stick are very soft and minute, but if you go all the way to the end,
outside,
there's an exponential curve. So you actually, at the very end, you still have your 100% or whatever your dual rates have been dialed into.
Right.
So.
And mixing, if you're going to start with a flying wing, you want to make sure you have a transmitter that can do the mixing.
Elevon mixing.
Elevon, because you're going to have to use both of them in different functions.
And always check your manufacturer's manual too. They have key information like which way the expo goes, whether it's a negative or positive value, the different functions, the ways to mix it. All those parameters, all those instructions will be found in your manual. It's very important to read that.
All right, we want to thank you guys for watching, and thanks to Horizon Hobby for sponsoring this episode. If you've missed any of the previous beginner episodes, make sure you go back and check them out because there's lots of helpful stuff there.
A lot of amazing information. There's also links below too that go really far in depth, things like Elevon mixing, dual rates expos, and flight. You know, you can see all those things. So check out the links below.
Definitely. All right, we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.